All right. Welcome everyone to our session, Future Ready. And today we are focused on career pathways and the soft skills youth need. And we're going to place a heavy emphasis on those soft skills. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all again for joining us today. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. We'll be engaging through the chat boxes throughout the session for today. My name is Shanika Peck. I'm one of the senior TA liaisons on the 21st CCLC NTAC team. And I'm coming in with a background on supporting youth as young as 3 years old, all the way up to 24. The last couple of years, I've spent some time with really supporting our youth 12 to 24 years old with getting ready for careers in general. So today I'm really excited to talk about those soft skills and more importantly, what we can do to support our youth as they develop and practice those soft skills. But I'll also encourage you all to share your best practices and strategies in the chat box as we move throughout the session today. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Chaz.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Chaz Sumners. I'm a Subgrantee TA liaison with the NTAC team, and I'm really excited about talking today about soft skills. I spent 5 years teaching at a technical school in my county, and I can't tell you how many times that kids would leave the technical school, they'd graduate, and they'd have all these amazing skills, these hard skills, like these skills that they've learned in their trade, but then when they get into the shop or they get into the salon or whatever, all of a sudden they lack that soft skill, like maybe a communication piece or something like that, that makes it difficult for them to really succeed to the level that they otherwise could. So I'm really excited to talk about this.
Awesome. And again, we will be sharing some strategies and best practices around how we can support our youth in developing those soft skills as program directors or program leaders, maybe your frontline staff, but also as an employer, right? Because this is something that is definitely a need, and we would love to see it within our youth as well as adults as well, right? We definitely can take some time to help practice those skills. So without further ado, I do want to just give you a little background 21st CCLC NTAC has to offer. If this is your first time joining a webinar that we are facilitating, or maybe you're returning, this is just a quick little reminder about our vision and mission behind what we hope for you all to gain. Our vision is to help support all professionals in the world of 21st CCLC programs to obtain the knowledge and skills needed to engage and empower our youth and their families into becoming lifelong learners. So our mission is to really provide you all with those evidence-based resources, professional learning opportunities so that you can build the capacity within yourself and your team or within your state on leading high quality 21st CCLC programming so that we can best serve, again, our youth and their families. Now, a lot of things that we talk about in terms of building capacity kind of stem from these different priority areas. And so I'll just briefly just highlight a couple of things. And if you've spent some time on our website, you'll also notice that we kind of touch on a number of these priority areas, right? So our main focus here is to help support you all, again, in building that capacity within your program or across your state, across the state, or just across the nation in general. And so we've been working with the Department of Education to establish these 7 priority areas and talk about how we can best support you all. So this may look like us providing resources, trainings, and other learning opportunities to support or address the impacts of COVID-19, providing equity of access to resources, supporting students' SEL needs. We have a heavy emphasis on an academic focus area, right? Especially if we are talking about learning recovery. But just a few of these focus areas may look like us providing support and you building student academic as it aligned with the traditional school day. We also have a few resources around STEM activities, and the list goes on. Today, we're going to talk about career pathways in particular as it relates back to our youth, but we also support statutory and programmatic requirements. So this may look like helping you or your team understand how to best implement and evaluate 21st CCLC programs. We are also really focused on supporting those programs who are in rural areas and other areas that may be identified by the NTAC team and, of course, the Department of Education. We are also looking at ways that we can best support fiscal compliance within programming, because this, of course, can be quite difficult if you are new to the project or initiative and so on and so forth. Now, with all of that being said, today we are going to cover a number of things. And again, our main focus is career pathways, and we're placing a heavy emphasis on the soft skills. So we are going to take some time to understand the importance of soft skills. We'll identify key soft skills for career success within our youth. We'll also explore some practical strategies for soft skill development. And then, of course, we would hope that you are walking away from this session ready to empower youth to be future ready, right? So let me know in the chat, but we're going to move forward, right? Now, we mentioned soft skills quite a bit here, right? So we'll start with defining what those soft skills are, right? So what we would like to just address here is that when we think about soft skills, we're thinking about those personal attributes, those interpersonal skills and situational behaviors that would allow youth or any individual to effectively interact with others and navigate the work landscape, regardless of their environment or where they are coming in from or their background experiences. Now, because we're focused on soft skills, that doesn't mean that we're going to put, hard skills at the wayside. Hard skills are important, and usually hard skills are focused on those technical skills or those specific job skills that youth or any individual would need to make sure they are meeting the requirements of their job. But we really want to focus on those soft skills, because that is what's really transferable across industries, across any job task or things like that. And so that may include things like communication, teamwork, problem solving, adaptability. The list may go on. Now, as we review each of these soft skills, you may already have in mind some soft skills that you would like to prioritize, right? But when we think about soft skills, it's really important that we also think about why it's important to build within our youth those transferable skills that they can use in any industry, right? Now, with my background, I spoke a lot with employers and youth workforce providers, and they're all focused on building those soft skills. Now, why? There's some research there that shows that a lot of employers, they value soft skills, if not more, but just as much as those hard skills, right? So they often value employees who can come in and communicate well, not just within their own teams, but across departments. They are looking for employees who can work well within their own team, or they can adapt to different changes that may be happening within the organization. If you are a program leader or maybe a frontline staff, you may be a part of a program where you are looking for volunteers or young professionals who can come in and support the program. And in order for them to support it, they need to be flexible, right? They need to prioritize adaptability. So there's a lot of things that may come into play when we think about soft skills and why it's so important for not only us to help youth practice or have an opportunity to demonstrate mastery of these skills, but this is something that they will need in and out of your program. So that is what we are going to focus on today. Again, those soft skills. But before we get even further into what this looks like, or any of those strategies that you can implement in your program, we would love to just start with where you are, right? So let us know in the chat box, what are the key soft skills that are essential for success in today's workplace. You can also share which soft skills you think students are most deficient in. So go ahead and let us know in the chat box. Again, what are the key soft skills essential for success in today's workplace? And what are the soft skills you think students are most deficient in? So again, I'll let you guys take some time to share your thoughts in the chat box. I'll also share with myself. I know communication is at the very top of everyone's list. And of course, we're going to talk about it a little bit more as we go along, right, Jazz? But
Absolutely.
it's definitely a skill that is being prioritized in a lot of workplaces, but it's also a skill that we're seeing a lot of youth struggle with, especially with their experiences the last couple of years.
Yeah.
As we get some more responses in the chat, Chaz, what are you thinking?
I mean, I'm thinking about adaptability, being able to, pivot and change as circumstances dictate, because, regardless of what job you're doing, whenever your plan actually hits, like when your wheels go down and your plan hits the road, all of a sudden that changes. And so you need to be able to pivot and adapt and change and not get flustered by that change. And
Absolutely.
some of the responses I'm seeing in the chat here also work with that. Like perseverance is like sort of goes hand in hand with that, adaptability piece, right? Because you have to have that frustration tolerance, that failure tolerance, so that when something goes wrong, you don't just sort of throw your hands up and go, "Well, okay, I guess there's nothing we can do about this."
Mhm. Absolutely. I'm seeing a couple of more responses to public speaking. We may be prioritizing skills that are definitely needed, especially with the nature of our work, right? Kristen shared communication, collaboration, critical thinking is definitely key soft skills in today's workplace. And what's really lacking is critical thinking, right?
Yeah.
Totally agree, especially with just how much technology have advanced so far. We definitely need to help youth, and again, sometimes our adults, to practice those critical thinking skills. Communication is coming up quite a bit, teamwork, conflict resolution,
Good
being a
one.
team player, absolutely. Empathy. Thank you for sharing, John. Absolutely. Trying to see things from the other's viewpoint and situations. And that's something that we all can work on. And of course, we are going to touch base on a number of these skills that's already been shared in the chat, plus a few things that you may need to keep in mind or consider as you plan out those different opportunities that you can establish for your youth to practice or master these different skills. So thank you all for sharing. We have a couple of these skills that are that aligns with what our work looks like in OST as well, right? Okay, so moving forward, I want you all to keep these skills in mind, and I want you to think about how you can adapt your current program design or your program activities to help foster these different skills within your youth. Now, again, this is a great opportunity for us to collaborate and share best practices. So feel free to use the chat box to share if something resonates with you or if you have a few cents to add to what we're discussing. So before we jump even further into those soft skills, I do want to take some time to talk about the job market, right? Now, some of our programs may be focused on supporting youth in terms of career and college readiness. Some of us may be partnered with employers or organizations to prepare youth to be a part of this growing pipeline into many different industries, right? So we really need to keep in mind of the job market and how it's rapidly changing because of many things, right? Advancement of technology, there's definitely different shifts in global economies, and of course, remote work, right? The effects of the COVID-19 pandemic isn't just hitting the academics. For us, it's also changing the way we see work or the way we can get work done, essentially, right? So a lot of these industries are moving more towards automation. You may see different organizations or programs using different machines or AI to help handle some automated work or routine tasks, so that we as humans can focus more on those essential job tasks, just move the mission forward. So this means that we really, really need to prioritize those soft skills like critical thinking, creativity. John, again, you brought up empathy. We're talking about emotional intelligence, right? Because this is something that we as human beings can definitely take ownership of and use it to leverage our own success as we become professionals in the roles that we are currently in or seeking, right? So, for example, in any tech heavy industry, right? We always think about like the different machines and platforms that can be used, those different softwares. Yeah, that's all important, right? It's the tech industry, but it's really important that they prioritize seeking and hiring candidates who can collaborate with one another or lead in teams or think strategically on how they can use these different tools to, again, push the organization's mission forward or just advance, right? So that, again, it takes a lot of mastery of these different soft skills. Now, it's also very important that, we keep in mind those different technical skills, but again, for us to help develop our youth, we really need them to be well-rounded, adaptable, and resilient, and that takes mastery of those soft skills, right? So again, you can let us know in the chat box how this may be impacting your organization or your program, or how you can also share what you see soft skills as impacting like on the job market moving forward. Now, let's talk about developing these different soft skills. Now, one of the best things about any out-of-school time programming is that it is a different environment compared to the school day, and we are in a unique position where we can help youth to develop these soft skills, right? We are providing them with a different learning environment compared to the traditional classroom, or we're hoping to, right? That's what sets us apart. That's what keeps our youth engaged and coming back to our program. So in your program, youth may have opportunities to engage in some hands-on activities. They may be engaged in some social experiences that they may not get during the school day, but they also have the opportunity to engage in some real-world challenges that would help them to foster that soft skill development. Right now, some of you may be implementing project-based learning or service learning or community service, or you may have an internship program, but you are exposing them to these different team-based projects. You're providing them leadership opportunities, and these different types of activities to not just interact with peers that they may not see during the school day, but you're also exposing them to the different adults, the different trusted adults who have experienced these different, they may have different career experiences that can share with youth. And that is also something that can occur within your program. So as we go forward, I also want you to think about how you are designing your program's activities in a way that is intentional, but also in a way where you are able to promote these soft skills so that you can provide opportunities for your youth to practice those skills, reflect on them, and hopefully grow. Okay. Now, we talked a little bit about what these soft skills are. A lot of you shared what those soft skills that you believe are essential. You may be thinking about some of these soft skills. They look a lot like number of skills that we kind of change the name to, right? I always think about employability skills. I think about 21st century skills, right? There's different ways we can categorize them and present them to our youth or present them to our staff as we talk more about how we can embed them into different activities. For the sake of today, because we can go for days, right? Talking about these soft skills and how to develop them. But today we are going to organize them into like 3 different areas. We are going to look at these different skills as social, executive functioning skills, or personal development skills. Now, of course, you may see a few skills that you are prioritizing. You may not see it here, but honestly, it pretty much falls into the same category, right? So if we're thinking about those social soft skills, we're talking about teamwork, right? That collaborative piece where they can work together towards a common goal. We're talking about leadership, and of course, possibly the different styles to leadership so that youth can inspire and guide others into achieving a vision or mission. We're also talking about that networking piece, right, where we're building and maintaining those professional relationships so that we can support each other and, of course, grow. Conflict resolution, a lot of you brought this up in the chat box. We're talking about those skills we need to navigate those different disagreements and different perspectives and viewpoints. We're also thinking about those executive functioning skills as well, right? Those problem solving. Are youth able to identify challenges? Can they come up with realistic solutions or innovative solutions? We're thinking about critical thinking, right? Now, critical thinking doesn't just happen in a professional workplace. It also happens, on a personal level, especially as we navigate social media and learn about what we are actually seeing and identifying credible information and sources, right? So that we can make informed decisions. Problem solving, I think I mentioned problem solving. What was it? Decision making. Creativity. When we think about personal development, we're talking about time management, which is key in a lot of workplaces, right? A lot of us are crunched for time. Adaptability, some of you brought this up as well as being a key or an essential soft skill. Resilience, we definitely want to help our youth have that growth mindset just to keep pushing forward, right? Someone mentioned perseverance here. I think that can fall under the same category. And professionalism. This is something that we may have a constant conversation about professionalism and how to uphold what our organization would like to portray when we are in different spaces and places and things like that. So what we'll do is we'll take our time to go through as many of these soft skills as possible during this session. But I do want to mention right now, and this is something that was brought up earlier, before we can actually practice and master these soft skills, and we're talking about our youth here, we really need to take a look at the core foundation, right? And that is really communication, right? We're going to start with communication. Now, you didn't see that listed there because honestly, it's across the board, right? It falls in a lot of different places when it comes to how we categorize these different soft skills. But communication is the foundation of it all, right? Now, effective communication, it's not just about how clearly we can speak, right? It's about that active listening. It's about understanding nonverbal cues. It's about how we can adapt our message so that we can reach different audiences, right? And so in the workplace, communication can actually make or break the team. And of course, you can let us know in the chat box how communication comes through within your own program or what you're seeing with your youth on how they communicate with one another. But as we think about communication, we definitely want to help support our youth with conveying their ideas during a meeting, right? They're in a leadership position. Giving and receiving feedback definitely requires effective communication, right? A lot of our youth who are already involved in a lot of the programming that we do, and it may be team-based activities, they need to use communication to effectively collaborate on a project or within a team, right? So overall, strong communication skills are extremely important. So in your program, and again, you can let me know in the chat about what you're doing to support communication within your program, but you can help youth build these skills through a number of activities that we mentioned before. An easy activity that you can implement right away, just encouraging dialogue, right? Helping youth learn how to argue effectively, right? Help them understand that as you communicate, you're going to, enter in some disagreements, and that is okay, right? If we are helping our youth with becoming effective communicators, then they will be able to move on and be successful global citizens, right? They will understand that, of course, not everyone is to agree with everything that I'm saying, as long as I'm able to clearly communicate my message and reach those different audiences, because that's really important. But we also mentioned before, active listening is just as important, right? So you may also have role-playing exercises, and I see this all the time, not just in 21st CCLC programs, but also those youth workforce development programs where you provide a safe space for youth to practice communicating whatever message it is, or maybe communicating through some kind of exercise where they are presented with a challenge, but they're also working on different ways they can communicate certain messages as it pertains to a specific job task or a job responsibility. You may also have some peer feedback sessions so that it isn't strictly guided by adults. They may learn how to on sharing, their experiences or feedback. Those are all different ways that you can help youth develop communication skills. And again, let me know in the chat what you're doing for communication, or how about this? In the chat box, describe a situation where you saw effective communication in action. So we want to hear from you all. And again, we're thinking about communication as the foundation of all of our soft skills. So again, you're describing a situation where you saw effective communication in action. What made it effective? And what was the impact? So I would love to hear from you all. As we get some responses, Chaz, do you have a situation where you saw effective
Sure.
communication in
Yeah.
action?
Um, the first one that came to mind for me was I remember in my first teaching position, which was a therapeutic school with a 24-hour lockdown school. So the kids stayed on campus and, they had a number of emotional regulation issues. We had one student who had just completely had it with what was going on in the classroom, got up, walked out of the classroom, and just started punching like shatterproof glass and hitting it. And she ended up hitting it so hard that she did actually create a little spider crack in it. And I was new, so I did not know how to intervene in this situation. And my principal walks up and just stands next to the glass while this kid's punching it and starts talking to them and listening to what they're screaming about. So this girl is screaming at the top of her lungs about all of these complaints that she had. And the principal just starts going, okay, I hear you. Yeah, that could be really frustrating. I know that if I were in that situation, I'd be feeling really angry too. And slowly you saw the punches get softer and softer and softer until the point where she stopped punching the glass and just turned to the principal and started having an actual conversation, right? It's that active listening piece combined with the empathy in the moment and just being present there and listening to somebody and their worries and their concerns in the moment.
Yeah, so I'm hearing a lot of things from that situation. It sounds like that principal definitely has some de-escalation strategies that I would love to hear more about from him or that person. But absolutely, right? So again, that active listening piece is so important when it comes to effective communication. I've seen some great communication and action with my youth that I had during that youth workforce program. When we started the program, they weren't too sure on how to let their boss know that they're going to be late. So they would always just reach out to me like, can you let my supervisor know that, the train isn't running? Just like, I'm not your middleman here. Okay. This is your job responsibility. This is your work. You have to figure out how you can communicate with them. So one student in particular actually took the time to sit down with their supervisor and just talk about her needs And she talked about, her relying on public transportation, and she wanted to make sure that she, let the supervisor know when she would be late, but she wasn't too sure if it would be appropriate to text her supervisor. And she wasn't really savvy with her email. She's good at checking, but it's like, what do I really write in this email? It feels too serious, right? So after that conversation, she learned a little bit more about preferences, communication preferences with her boss. And her boss also learned more about her own preferences and how and the methods that she would like to use to communicate. And so by the end of the summer, they were on good terms. They were able to communicate with one another, using those different preferences. So, and of course, she definitely learned how to send an email,
Hmm.
which is very important. I don't know about you all, but an email or sending an appropriate email is quite difficult for a lot of youth. But again, providing those opportunities for them to practice and learn more about how to act as a professional when sending these messages is also very helpful with communication. All right. And again, we'll spend some time moving forward throughout the session, but again, we'll be asking you to share, your different experiences with these different skills. And of course, we'll also talk about what you can do in your program. All right, so now let's jump into those soft skills that we mentioned before. We're going to start with teamwork. All right, so teamwork, involves, again, working collaboratively with others to achieve a shared goal. So almost every career that at least I'm aware of, the ability to work well with others is so important to the success of not just the individual, but the overall organization, right? So this requires, again, effective communication, but there's also some trust there and a willingness to compromise, right? Now, it also involves us to recognize the strengths and the contributions of others that are on our team. It's really important that we are able to leverage those different experiences and strengths of each of our members, and just keep in mind the diverse skills and perspectives that everyone is bringing to the table. So in your program, you can foster this teamwork again by using those project-based learning activities or instructional approaches. You may kind of rely on those team building exercises that you may use in the beginning of your program or the beginning of an activity. You may support your program activities with more of a collaborative approach to how they can problem solve. And this can look like something so simple as a game. We also highly encourage programs to build in a self-reflection piece so that youth can reflect on their experiences or debrief after that group work that you have put into place for those program activities. It's really just to help them recognize, what worked well, what can be improved, what not to do ever again, what to continue to do in their work moving forward. And again, you can go ahead and share what you're doing to support teamwork within your program. All right. The next one is adaptability, right? So this is something that we brought up earlier too, right? We really want to help support our youth kind of pivot in our their job placement, or just learning how to utilize these skills to kind of switch positions or adapt to their changing work environment, right? So it's really important that we support youth in building those skills that they need to remain flexible in the face of change. So we all know that today there's a lot of fast-paced initiatives moving forward. It's really important that we are remaining as adaptable as possible. And the same thing is, should be the same expectations that we have for ourselves. We should have those expectations for youth as well, right? Because again, employers definitely value those employees and individuals who can pivot, right, when needed, especially when we are operating under pressure. A lot of programming, we are already constricted to a short period of time that we are spending with youth. So if you have youth in your program who may be volunteering, we are hoping to provide opportunities for them to also learn how to pivot when needed motivated, right? Hopefully they can learn these different skills as quickly as they can and still remain calm under pressure. So you may be supporting adaptability by introducing a new challenge. If you are going down that scenario-based route, where you have youth engage in like that role-playing aspect, right? You may incorporate some activities that require a lot of creative problem solving, right? You may pose like this huge issue, and this is something that I did with my high schoolers. I told them that they were on a team of nuclear specialists and they had to remove the toxic waste from in the middle of the circle, but they can't touch it with their hands. And at first we're like, oh, that's easy. It took them some time to get the waste. It was actually just a cup. It was a red cup out from the circle. But then I said, you know what? You have to do that within 5 minutes. So then, I'm increasing the pressure. Oh, you can do that, but two of your team members just lost a hand, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can modify the activities that you are already implementing in your program, and change it in a way where they are able to practice being adaptable. Right. Now, another approach could be for you to organize an outdoor event. So if this is something that is feasible, especially with your program space, you can probably build a team building activity, and then like again, midway through, something unexpected happens, maybe a weather change, or you share like a new challenge that is happening outdoors. They have to figure out how they can adjust their approach to the activity and still meet those expectations or that goal. And again, you can go ahead and share what you're doing to support adaptability. We'll move through these different soft skills and just share a few of those strategies on how you can support it. Another area or another soft skill is problem solving, right? So it's the ability to identify those challenges, like I mentioned before, but also produce effective solutions. Now, this skill is extremely important in any career industry, right? So as problems and obstacles come up in any workplace, something that we can't really avoid. So it's really important that we help support our youth in developing effective problem-solving techniques, and that actually requires critical thinking, creativity, and persistence. So as you can see, like a lot of these soft skills, they kind of work together. They build upon each other. You need one to be successful in another, right? So in your program, you may foster problem solving by presenting youth with a real world challenge, right? Something that is actually happening in their community and potentially affecting each of your youth, or maybe a group, a special population within that community, and just have them work together to think critically, and just come together to figure out a solution that is realistic or relevant to the cause and that can actually help support their community. Now, if you have the opportunity to partner with businesses or other organizations, you may have them present their own like real life problems that's really happening within the workplace and present it to youth so that they can figure out how they would attack that problem, right? How can they address that problem and possibly brainstorm and present these different solutions to real businesses and real organizations, right? This may also involve them coming up with a pros and cons list. It also involves them communicating with those businesses and organizations about what they've already done in the past and what they can move forward with. So there's a lot that can be done here. Yep. All right. The next strategy, or I'm sorry, soft skill is critical thinking. Now, this, we briefly mentioned this earlier before, right? This is the ability to analyze information, evaluate options, and make informed decisions. Now, in the workplace, we are, constantly put in a position where we have to assess these different situations so that we can figure out a best course of action to address it. And of course, we definitely want to avoid making impulsive decisions, right? Especially if it's based on incomplete information. And I also see this pop up a lot with youth who are heavily engaged in social media or what they're learning out through, their devices, right? So it's really important that we help youth develop the critical thinking skills needed to identify credible sources of information and what isn't so credible so that we can kind of process what we are seeing on these different social media platforms or what we're hearing from different news sources and things like that. So in your program, you can tie in, the pros and cons of social media or the misinformation or the information that's being provided, and just encourage you to ask questions, right? How is this possible? Why is this happening, right? What can we learn from what happened in the past, and how they can analyze that data and think about the consequences of actions that may be put into place. So you may use case studies. Again, you can provide a space to support debates, right? Especially if it's in a safe space for them to share their thinking and be placed in a position where they can listen to those different perspectives and how it may impact different decision-making skills. You may also present a scenario, right, on these conflicting information, and they may act as if they are a part of a company and decide on what decision that company should make moving forward. Another one is, again, focus on those problem solving tasks, right? We talk about those team building tasks. We can focus more on the problem piece and provide youth with different types of sources of data and viewpoints and have them kind of sort through what is credible or what information is outdated or incorrect, and just kind of move forward with how they can address those different situations. Chaz, you have something to add?
Oh, no, sorry.
No. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I muted. I think. All right. We have a few people adding a couple of information here in the chat box. Again, if you are implementing or if you've experienced some programming that kind of support these soft skills, go ahead and share it in the chat. It looks like Brittany's been focused on restorative justice and incorporating it into every classroom and morning meetings. Restorative justice is also a great way to kind of segue into supporting these different soft skills, right? Providing them the opportunity to have those conversations with peers, not just with what's happening within the program space, but also how this can be applied to those real life conversations and developing those different types of interventions that could occur in the real world. So I'm glad someone's using that to their advantage. Okay, so that's it with critical thinking. What we'll do is pivot over to leadership, and I'm going to let Chaz take over.
Absolutely. And honestly, I think the restorative justice conversation is a great segue into leadership because giving your students the opportunity to lead proactive and reactive restorative circles when there's been harm done in the classroom is a great way for them to get real leadership, hands-on leadership experience, right? A lot of these soft skills, some of them they're easier to teach than others. Leadership is very difficult to just teach in a classroom setting, right? You have to sort of learn it by doing. It's not just about holding the title, it's about inspiring and guiding others towards a common goal. Um, Good leaders motivate their teams and they communicate a vision, but they also create an environment where others can thrive, right? And that's the thing that sometimes gets lost in leadership. It's a valuable skill in any career, of course, right? But it's important to start developing it early. And so giving students opportunities as early as possible to start being leaders in like group settings amongst their peers is crucial. Uh, you can create leadership opportunities in your programs by encouraging youth to take on roles of responsibility. That can be like leading a project. It could be mentoring other peers, doing sort of peer mentoring, either, with like social emotional stuff or just peer homework buddies that are helping out and mentoring each other. You can also have your students organize an event that you're putting on. I used to love when I was running, uh, OST programs. I would say, okay, well, so we want to have this party, right? But I'm not going to plan it. You guys are going to plan it. It's your party, right? So let's sit down and let's start planning it. How do we do that? Somebody raises their like, oh, we should start brainstorming. Okay, great. Why don't you start a list? Let's start making a list. You just give them slowly these responsibilities until it just sort of feels comfortable for them, kind of feels like second nature. You could also teach leadership skills through activities that emphasize collaboration or delegation and decision making. Project based learning is a great way to do this. You have students take turns being the person who sort of like is the lead for the project that you're doing your project based learning, and then that lets them delegate different responsibilities to people they think they can be successful in them. It lets them make real time decisions and lets them sort of adapt on the fly given things that could come up during the project based learning process, or sort of like artificial impediments that we could put in during it, that we were talking about earlier, like, oh, okay, now there's a hurricane, so how are you going to adapt your plan to that? It's important to help youth see that leadership isn't just about bossing people around, right? It's about serving others. It's about being a servant leader, and that way we can help everybody succeed. So let's just really quickly look at a couple different examples of activities that could encourage leadership when you're fostering that you want to foster collaboration, delegation, decision making, right? A decision making challenge. You can do some sort of scenario based leadership objective. You give them, a task like, hey, listen, you're planning a community event, but on the day of the event, several key items like the chairs or decorations haven't arrived. What do we do? And you can appoint a team leader. They can lead a brainstorming session, delegate tasks, like I was saying, and then finally make that decision. Pull the trigger on it. And then after the task, it's important to reflect on the decision making process that went into, you know, what the final outcome was, and that way you can have them practice collaborative problem solving, and the leaders gain experience in making tough decisions under pressure while also valuing the input of their team, which is really the key part. Another thing you could do is sort of a delegation relay. And this is really useful when you're teaching youth the importance of delegating and efficient teamwork, really. You create like a relay challenge where a group has to accomplish a set of tasks that require different skills. So, doing a puzzle, delivering a short presentation, making a poster. One team member is designated as the leader, and they can't perform any tasks, but they have to assign all the other tasks to people based on their strengths and their skills. So the leader is responsible for making the quick decisions on who does what and supporting the team by giving instructions and encouraging collaboration, right? They're ensuring the timely completion of their tasks by checking in with their team members and helping to problem solve if somebody is struggling. That's what they're doing. And then everybody else is doing the little tasks that make up the relay. And then after the relay, again, we want to reflect. We want to talk about how the leader's delegation affected the outcome. Could it have been delegated better? Talk about how people felt about their assigned roles, and if they were in this leadership position, if they would have delegated them differently. And so through an activity like this, youth learn that leadership is not just about doing everything for themselves, like taking on all those responsibilities for yourself. It's about recognizing the strengths in the people in your team and then trusting your team to execute those tasks efficiently. Just a couple little examples of how you can teach leadership in like a classroom or OST time setting. So let's go ahead and look at how we can integrate some of these soft skills into our program design, right? We've covered some key soft skills, but let's talk about what it looks like when they're actually baked in to how you're designing activities. Because it's not just about adding new activities, right? It's about embedding them into everything you do. So think about your current programs, right? And think about whether there are ways to incorporate communication, teamwork, and problem solving into the activities you already run. How can you sort of make a soft skill development an intentional part of your program's culture? And if that's something that you're already working on, please feel free to share out in the chat box. I'd love to hear how you're already sort of molding all of those things together. You want to start by evaluating the current activities that you're providing, and you want to assess how soft skills are already being integrated. You want to sort of take a real close look at the types of tasks that your youth are already engaged in. Are there opportunities to communicate and collaborate together? Do you give them problems to solve, right? Or do you just make everything very cut and dry, which is, it's an understandable temptation because especially in very busy or crowded OST time settings, it's sometimes it feels better to just want everything to move quickly and efficiently. But stopping and just giving them like a little hiccup to something like a normal routine that they do is a great way to sort of um, you know do that team building and help them figure out how to solve problems with critical thinking. You want to take a look at just like how often skills come naturally into play and how well youth are developing them through the activities that you're doing or activities that they're doing on their own. You might see them playing gaga ball and you see them communicating way more efficiently than you see them communicating in the classroom because it's a high stakes environment. They're all very invested in it and they want to make sure that they're successful, they can win. Excuse me. You can also use sort of informal checklists or like observation forms to track these instances, or it can just be anecdotal when you're talking with your staff about them. Speaking of talking with your staff, it's important that you gather feedback from both your youth and your staff, right? You want to ask your staff to reflect on the soft skills that they feel need building and whether they have ideas for what activities can help build them and where they see room for growth, not just with youth and their soft skills, but with your activities. You also want to ask, you want to ask your youth about how they feel like the activities are going and what soft skills they think are important to them, because you'd be really surprised at their answers and how perceptive and in depth an answer that a student, no matter the age, can really give you. And all this feedback will give you a clearer picture of where your skill development's already happening and where you could use a little more intentional focus. So once you've done all that, once you've evaluated your current program, you want to think about how you can enhance your soft skill integration. So for example, you could incorporate regular reflection sessions where youth discuss what soft skills they use in an activity and how they can improve. And it makes them more mindful of these skills as well. Or you could create a soft skill curriculum that sort of runs alongside your academic or your enrichment programming. So they sort of run in parallel, and that's a good way to make sure that the activities that you're running, the enrichment and the academic activities that you're running are informed by these soft skills. That when you intentionally embed them into the development of your existing activities, you can create a program environment where these essential skills are nurtured consistently and it doesn't just feel like sort of a one-off or a hit it and quit it type thing. So one of the challenges with soft skills is that they can be really difficult to measure. It's hard to have hard and fast metrics for things like that. Unlike academic achievements, which you can track through grades and test scores, soft skills are a lot more subjective and they're often much harder to quantify. However, there are ways to measure that soft skill development. You can use things like self-assessments so that students can reflect on how their development is progressing. You can use peer assessments. So you can have, you can put people in groups, you can put them in pairs, you can just have them talk about their growth and where they see growth in each other. You could also do observation checklists that help you gauge your project progress over time. Like, oh, okay, I've seen this many instances of kids using, effective communication. Okay, that's great. That's up from 3 months ago. So clearly we're making progress. This lets you track participation in your activities that promote soft skills, and it lets you look for changes in behavior. These sort of see changes that you will observe in your, you know, program as a whole. Things like improved communication or increased confidence in group settings, right? You're just like, oh, okay, that kid never used to speak up, but now they're speaking up, they're voicing their opinion, and they're doing it in a group, which they would not have felt comfortable doing before. So it's key. The key, whatever you're doing to assess soft skills, is to use multiple methods of assessment because they're so difficult to sort of nail down. You also want to make sure that you recognize that soft skill development is a gradual process, right? It can be slow going. It can be slow going, but it's amazing just how much of a snowball effect doing these things can actually have on your program. And as you're gradually, building up these wins, you want to celebrate these small wins in the moment. I used to just love just during an activity, you see a kid that, for instance, in the early example, didn't normally speak up, like they didn't used to do that. You see them speak up in the activity, and right there in the moment, you say, "Hey, listen, I really loved how, you voiced your opinion right there, and you said what you really felt. That's amazing." And it's incredible how impactful that can be, recognizing those positive traits just in the moment for a student. So let's go ahead and pivot to time management, right? Time management is a skill that's important, not just for our youth, but for ourselves, right? There are never enough hours in the day. Right before this call, we were having a conversation. We were saying, man, I wish there were just more hours in the day so that I can get things done. So it's something that we often overlook because we just sort of, especially as we get older, we assume that we're always going to be a little under the gun. We're going to feel a little pressured. But with effective time management, that's not necessarily the case. So when we talk about effective time management, what are we talking about, right? We're talking about the ability to prioritize tasks, to set goals, and to manage one's schedule, to meet deadlines and to achieve your objectives. Now, in the workplace, poor time management leads to missed deadlines, increased stress, and decreased, productivity. But conversely, when you have strong time management skills, it helps individuals stay organized, helps them balance multiple responsibilities, which is going to happen in the workplace. Even if you think, oh, okay, this is my only job, there are always going to be other aspects that get introduced to your job. And also, an overlooked uh, benefit of it is that it helps you maintain a healthy work-life balance, which is something that we could all use a little more, quite frankly. So, in your programs, how do you help youth develop time management skills? Well, you can do that by teaching them how to create schedules, um, breaking tasks down into manageable steps. Right, that's always a great thing. You have a student that's just like, oh my gosh, I have this huge project. Okay, well, so what are we doing with this project? What is the first step? Right, don't think about the whole project. Think about one step at a time. Right, sort of how do you hug an elephant? Well, you do it, one leg at a time. You give them a hug on this leg, you give them a hug on that leg, and then all of a sudden you've hugged this whole elephant. You also want to encourage your students to reflect on how they spend their time and to identify areas where they can improve this, right? So with older kids, I used to love having them just like create a quick little pie chart. Okay, now show me how much of your time you spend on your phone. Okay, now show me how much of your time you spend playing video games. Now show, and so you have it broken down in a visual manner for them to see just how they're spending their time, which lets them really look at, okay, well, I guess I could probably take a little bit out of this slice and devote it to this slice instead, letting them really think about how they're spending their time. And so you want to try to incorporate time management into a lot of your different activities, even just like, fun recess activities. You can have, students keep track of their own time for example. Or you could have students create a timeline for a project, estimating like how much time each little part of it'll take. And then once the project's over, you can have them reflect on it. Like, oh, okay, well, how accurate was your timeline? And why do you think it wasn't accurate here or there? So, of course, helping students develop good time management habits early on will benefit youth in all areas of their lives. Um, it helps them manage their responsibilities effectively, and it helps them reduce stress. And as they get older, they'll just have more and more stressors. So we want to make sure that they're equipped to handle those things. So let's look at a little scenario here, and let's think about how we can help with time management. So we have a student in our program that's struggling to complete a project on time. Despite being motivated and capable, they're overwhelmed with the workload and they have difficulty prioritizing their tasks. The project's due in 2 days, and the student feels anxious and unsure about how to manage their time effectively. So, what steps would you take to help them manage their time better? Go ahead and share out in the chat box. Let me know what you guys are thinking. While we're letting everybody share, Shanika, do you have an idea?
Absolutely. Well, first, I love to go over expectations with my youth and young adults in terms of time management altogether. So reviewing schedules is definitely at the top of my list, or having them collaborate with me as I build out their schedule. So they're aware of their job responsibilities, but we're also taking the time to actually have them reflect and think about how much time they will need to spend on a certain job task um, as it relates to their entire schedule. So that's been very, very helpful. Especially with during our check-ins. So sometimes we, create these schedules, it may not work. So we always have like this mid-year or mid-program check-in just to reevaluate whether or not that schedule is working for them, or if they are having trouble with completing a job task. Then we talk about, like what you mentioned before, Chaz, breaking down those different tasks into more manageable pieces. But yeah, definitely having them be a part of, creating that schedule and just think about their own time, how they are managing their time with tasks.
I love that. I love that reflective piece of it too. Like, okay, well, let's look at it now that we're like mid-year.
Mhm.
How accurate were we? Why were we not accurate in certain places? Oh, okay. Well, let's see what we got from Brittany here. Analysis of workload and estimating how much time tasks will take. They need help with this first, until they build the skill. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Let's look at each little piece of putting together this project, right? Let's look at doing the research. Let's look at like putting together the poster. Let's look at writing the like passages that go on the poster. How long do you think each one of these things take? And also work to identify priorities, right? Yeah, what's the most important stuff, right? Maybe the graphics aren't really the most important part of this project, right? But the student might be fixated on like, oh, I just want to get the perfect picture of, I don't know, this anime that I'm doing a like project on, or like this cool book that I wrote that I read. But that might not be the higher priority task when it comes to putting together this project. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing. All right, so let's take a look at conflict resolution, right? Again, a skill that not just needs to be taught to youth, but I think a number of adults could probably use a little bit of refresher on. So, I mean, we know that conflict is a natural part of any workplace, and it's a natural part of interactions, right? People are going to come into conflict because people are going to have, different opinions, and that's okay. The important thing is to have the ability to navigate disagreements in a constructive way. And that's an invaluable soft skill, right? Conflict resolution involves understanding different viewpoints, communicating your own viewpoint effectively, and finding a solution that satisfies all the parties involved. In the workplace, unresolved conflicts can lead to tension, decreased productivity, and definitely a negative work environment, which just overall will negatively affect everybody's work. On the other hand, right, if you have effective conflict resolution, you can strengthen relationships within your team. um, you can enhance collaboration because those relationships are stronger. It's like, oh, okay, well, now of course I'll go talk to Shanika about this thing. We can always get along, and if we disagree, we know that we'll do so, collegially. And it also promotes a positive team dynamic, right? And that's really important, especially you know, as workplaces move to less isolated work and more team-based work. So how do we do this in your program, right? Um, a great way that I like to do conflict resolution and like teach it is by doing role playing sort of common workplace scenarios, and then you sort of facilitate a discussion on empathy and active listening. Yes, I agree, Jan. It's definitely something that can be hard for adults. Everybody needs practice on it. We all do, right? Um, you, it's nice to give in a controlled environment. You give students a scenario where it's like, okay, well, here's a conflict. I need you guys to be able to like have a conversation about this and resolve it. This is another great place where restorative conversations can come in. Sort of doing things like teaching kids to use I statements. Well, I feel angry when I see somebody, take somebody else's place in line. Doing these things that let you effectively communicate your position, as well as being able to appreciate the position of somebody else. Like for example, you could present a scenario where two students are, I don't know, having a disagreement about a project, right? And then you encourage them to discuss their perspective about it and then figure out a solution that takes everybody's needs into account. When you teach them how to resolve conflicts constructively, it doesn't just help them in their future career, right? It just helps them in every personal relationship and interaction they're going to have, no matter where that takes place or who that takes place with. So, now that we've talked about conflict resolution, let's talk about a little bit about decision making, another really critical skill, right? So when we talk about decision making, we're talking about evaluating other people's opinions, considering potential outcomes, and making informed choices. And in the workplace, strong decision making skills help individuals to take initiative. It of course helps them solve problems, right? And it helps them have the confidence to navigate complex situations so they don't get sort of analysis paralysis, right? Where they get stuck because they feel like there's so much going on and they just don't know even how to start making these decisions. No, conversely, poor decision making, we've all seen the negative consequences of that, right? You have missed opportunities, you have wasted resources, and then decision making comes from leadership, you can have a real decrease in morale of your entire team. In your programs, you can develop decision making skills by providing opportunities for youth to practice making choices in various scenarios. You everything from, oh, okay, I used to really love this one where, hey kids, it's time to order a new snack. Let's sit down together and talk about what snacks we would like to have. And everybody sits down, and this also is a great way to do conflict resolution, right? Because this can very quickly lead to conflicts between students. But you just sit there and you just work through each little piece of the decision making process when it comes to even doing something as small as ordering a snack. You also you want to discuss the pros and cons of different options. So in that example, like, listen, I love Oreo cookies too, but they're not exactly the most nutritious thing, and we want to make sure that you're being properly nourished here at your program, right? So like, maybe we'll talk about that. Let's put that on the brainstorming list for the party that we're going to have next month, right? You can do things like that. And then you want to have them reflect on the outcomes of their decisions. So, oh, okay, we decided to just buy all Sun Chips this month. Are we all really tired of Sun Chips by day 5? Yeah, okay. Well, maybe next time we'll think about that and we'll consider that when it comes to making the decision. Um, you want to, regardless of how you do it, how you introduce it in your program, you want to make sure that you're encouraging them to think critically about all of the options. And you want them to be able to justify their choice based on evidence and their reasoning. Like, well, why did you choose this thing? Even if the reasoning is flawed, if they have reasoning for it, at least they're making progress, right? You're seeing that gradual development of these soft skills. Helping all of our youth develop strong decision making skills prepares them to take on leadership roles, and it lets them navigate the complexities that come with a modern workplace. Having the confidence to make a decision when, especially with something that's been delegated to them, maybe by their boss, and they might otherwise feel scared to make that decision on their own. But if you start working with them, from a very young age, building skills, soft skills like decision making, then they'll have a lot more confidence to do such things. All right, let's go ahead and jump into networking. So networking, that's the process of building and maintaining professional relationships, right? That provides support and guidance and opportunities throughout your career. In today's job market, networking is often as important as, if not more important, let's be real for a second, than having the right skills or qualifications. Uh, and effective networking involves not just making connections, but also nurturing those relationships over time. Not just I know that person, but every once in a while I still go in and check in on that person. LinkedIn's a great way to do that kind of, right? You like somebody's post on LinkedIn, you have like a little bit of interaction, just little things, right, that nurture a relationship. Effective networking requires strong communication skills, emotional intelligence, and the ability to offer value to others in your network. In programs, you can help youth develop networking skills by teaching them how to introduce themselves, right? And engage in meaningful conversations and follow up with contacts. Instead of just having, when a kid gets picked up, their friend just sort of waves meekly and then runs away. Just, okay, well, why don't you have a discussion with, so and so's mom? Like, why don't you talk to them about the thing that you guys want to do? You were talking about having a sleepover. Why don't you guys go together and ask so and so's mom? You can also provide them opportunities to practice networking in real world settings. Like with older students, that can be things like career programs or mentorship opportunities. Um, those are great ways to just start networking, right? Especially because a lot of the people that tend to volunteer for mentorship are pretty connected in their local community. Um, so we know that networking is a crucial skill for career development. And by helping youth build that network, or like at least their skills for networking early on, you're setting them up for long-term success. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? Digital literacy. This day and age, that was not a soft skill that was ever talked about when I was in high school, mind you. But this is perhaps the crucial soft skill of the modern age, right? And it bakes in a lot of different things, right? It has decision making baked into it, it has communication baked into it, it has critical thinking baked into it. So when we talk about it, we're talking about the ability to use technology effectively, right? To navigate online platforms and understand the implications of your own digital footprint. Employers are increasingly expecting employees to be proficient in digital tools, from basic software educations to more advanced technologies like data analysis and digital marketing. Digital literacy also includes understanding cybersecurity, ethical online behavior, and the impact of social media. So, in today's rapidly evolving tech landscape, artificial intelligence has become a major component of digital literacy, right? AI is embedded in so many tools that we use daily now, from voice assistants to automated chatbots to data analysis platforms. So it's essential for youth to understand not just how AI works, but how to leverage AI powered tools in both personal and professional settings. In your programs, You can enhance AI literacy by teaching youth how AI tools like machine learning algorithms and recommendation systems and sort of like automation software stuff, how they can be applied to solve real world problems. Um, this can include things like practical activities, like using an AI-driven platform for project management or learning how AI algorithms work in your social media feed, right? Regardless of how you do it, by incorporating AI into your digital literacy curriculum, your students they don't just become consumers of technology, but they also gain the ability to understand and critically evaluate its role in their careers in the future. So, um, in addition to AI, digital literacy includes understanding cybersecurity, uh, ethical online behavior, and the impact in social media, right? Because those things just never go away. So, 5 years from now, when you're going to apply for a job and somebody sees it on social media, that can be a real problem. So, how do you drive that point home for students in your program? Um, you can teach students how to create a professional online presence, right? And that includes for older students setting up a LinkedIn profile. You also want to help them see settings on things like social media, and you want to help them explore the ethical implications of online behavior, talking about things like cyberbullying, misinformation, and digital security. By helping them develop these skills, you're preparing them to navigate a world that's just going to be ever more increasingly online, and to do so with confidence and integrity, which is going to be incredibly important to them, and when they're looking to secure a future job. Creativity, the fun soft skill, and perhaps the hardest to really teach, right? Creativity and innovation are highly valued in any workplace. And that means things like thinking outside the box, being able to come up with new ideas, finding innovative solutions to problems. Um, in a lot of industries, the ability to innovate can be the key differentiator between success and failure, right? Especially fast-paced, like tech-based industries. But creativity is not just limited to like your traditional creative fields like art and design. It's in every industry, from tech, like I just mentioned, to things like finance. And I mean, education is full of creativity, right? Like being a teacher is being a creative individual on a daily basis. So, how do we foster that creativity in our programs? Well, our programs provide a unique space for students to be able to take risks without having real problems associated with that. To sort of experiment with new ideas and to approach challenges from different angles. Like even if you see a kid trying a creative solution, you're like, all right, I know that's gonna not gonna work, right? Instead of stopping them in that process, as long as it's not going to be something that's destructive or dangerous, you can sort of just let it fail, which doesn't feel right in the moment, but is helpful with generating creative solutions to the problems that are created there, but also building that resiliency and that frustration tolerance. Um, when you celebrate the creative thinking of your students, and you encourage experimentation, you're helping them develop confidence to take those chances in their future careers. They're these are skills that aren't just valuable in the workplace, but they also, contribute to your own personal growth and fulfillment. So let's talk about cultural competence, a soft skill that does not get talked about very much, but is important in increasingly diverse workplaces, right? We're talking about the ability to understand, appreciate, and most importantly, interact with people from different cultures or belief systems from our own. In today's globalized workforce, skills increasingly important as teams become more diverse and organizations work across borders, right? Cultural competence involves being aware of cultural differences, showing respect for diverse perspectives, and also adapting your behavior to work effectively in a multicultural environment. You want to teach your youth to challenge stereotypes and address unconscious biases that they might have or they might see in others. And you want to make sure that you're promoting inclusivity in not just your program, but in every way that you interact. So how do we build cultural competence in our program? Well, we do that by exposing youth to diverse cultures. One thing I always loved was having a good old culture fair where everybody just comes in and they, share stuff about their own culture. A selfish benefit for me is that normally means that there are a lot of delicious foods that I get to try from different cultures, and I'm always down for a new delicious meal. Not that I can cook it, but I do like having them. It's also important to model cultural competence in your own interactions with not just youth, but with colleagues. You want to demonstrate respect for different perspectives, and that fosters an inclusive environment. You get to set the positive example for youth to work. So let's talk about professionalism. Oh, yeah, that's you, Shani. Sorry. I got carried
Oh,
away there.
good. I was definitely
Passionate about
following.
these soft skills.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, honestly, like just picking up where you left off with cultural competence, I think this plays a huge part in professionalism as well, right? Adapting to those different perspectives. That it's evident in how we see professionalism, right? So typically when we talk about professionalism and supporting youth with being professionals or how to be a professional within their job space or within program space, we always talk about how we can maintain a positive image, right? So this may look like being punctual, right? You're showing up on time, you're showing up in general. Showing that you are reliable, right? You are embodying that ethical behavior, or having a sense of morale here when you are representing the organization or the program as a young professional, right? And I'm thinking about our older youth here, right? Especially if they are volunteers, or maybe they're participating in your program as part of an internship program or some kind of work-based learning opportunity. They're learning about these different things that would help them become professionals or develop the skill of again, being a professional, right? So this may also include us talking about how we can respect others and adhere to workplace norms, because overall, like, we are familiar that having an idea behind what professionalism is, we're building trust and credibility when it comes to us serving as a representative of this program or organization or business, right? But I do also want to take the time to just drop a little bit of 2 cents here in terms of professionalism, and we're thinking about the cultural competence here as well. But we talked about the job market and the workplace culture, right? We are in a time where we have a lot of different generations still working within our workspace, right? We have our baby boomers, our Gen X, we have our millennials, we have Gen Z. Some of us may have Gen Alpha already in our program space, learning how to become a young professional or a part of our career and college readiness programming of some sort. And so it's really important that we have that conversation with youth about different experiences and the values that may come from these different generations, and how that impact our outlook on what it means to be professional or have professionalism, right? And so when we have that conversation with youth, they're able to understand that, okay, if I'm working in this industry or with this organization, I can build trust and credibility by doing A, B, C, and D, right? I can show respect and adhere to workplace norms by doing a number of things, but I'm also taking into consideration the different perspectives, right? We're also thinking about cultural differences that may play a part in how we maintain that positive image when it comes to professionalism as well, right? So that's just one thing. I definitely encourage you all to have that honest conversation with youth around professionalism, right? Have them ask those why questions, but also identify why it is important to adhere to certain workplace norms because of safety reasons, right? That's something that's always at the top of mind, especially when we prepare our youth to become those young professionals. And this also includes using cell phones, right? That's been a conversation I had with my youth plenty of times, right? The use of cell phones or the presence of social media while you are at work, that ties into professionalism as well. When we think about our younger generations, they some of them were literally born into the internet, and so it's a part of their everyday life. And so having this open conversation about how this may impact the workplace norm or workplace culture can definitely help them have a better understanding of what it means to maintain a positive image or carry out the organization or program's mission as a representative who may be a young professional or, again, a volunteer. Now, we also talked about resilience a little bit earlier during this session, and I think someone else also mentioned this in the chat as well. But when we talk about resilience, we're talking about the ability to recover from those setbacks, right? We also talked about how we would love our young people to be able to pivot and make those decisions when things call for change, right? Especially with, in today's world and work environment. Resilience is definitely one of those top soft skills that we would like to build within our youth so that they can stay focused, especially while they're under pressure. And that may involve us supporting them with the skills or strategies needed, such as having a growth mindset, right? Thinking about or generating those different solutions to help them overcome certain obstacles, right? Um, Ooh, we have Debbie. Debbie, actually, I think it was Debbie. Yep, Debbie, you mentioned using decision-making tug of war. I love that activity. And then honestly, I feel like that activity can be used to help youth practice any one of these soft skills, especially with, resilience, right? How can we bounce back from these different situations? But Debbie, you also shared, we let the students discuss why a solution might work, encourage them to think of the shortcomings and write everything down under each suggestion. Students then vote for one or the other. Then we go on to the next pair of suggestions. Sometimes it takes some guiding questions, but they get the hang of the process really quickly. Great, you're building those skills and you're helping them practice these skills in small tasks. So eventually they will be able to apply it, right? That's always been an issue with a lot of the things that we provide instruction on, right? We talk about all these skills, we talk about these strategies, but when youth are facing these challenges, are they quick to use that strategy, right? And that's another way you can kind of informally assess whether or not they are mastering those different skills. But that's a great activity that you're implementing, Debbie. Thank you for sharing. So activities like that, right? Having youth be a part of the discussion around how they can overcome these shortcomings or these challenges and how they can achieve those goals, that can all support resilience here, right? And show them how they can grow through adversity. So again, there's a lot of great things that you could do to support these different soft skills. Feel free to continue to share, but what we'll do here is just pause for a moment here and just kind of reflect. Chaz and I, we shared a lot of information with you all. And so we do want to give you an opportunity to kind of reflect on what's happening here. So we have a quick poll and it's multiple choice questions. We just want to, test your knowledge here. So which of the following is considered a soft skill for future job success? We have adaptability, critical thinking, digital literacy, or all of the above. And it looks like a lot of people are going with all of the above, which I totally agree, right? Job success, but also personal success, right? Awesome. And here's another question. Which soft skill is most related to understanding and managing your emotions and those of others? Now, this is probably going to be a challenge for some. So we kind of indirectly address this. I do want to give you a hint. Someone kind of dropped something that kind of hinted towards this. Yep, and I'm seeing some responses come in. Emotional intelligence, right? Absolutely. Right now, speaking of emotional intelligence, I do want to quickly pivot to the next area here. And before we end today, I do want us all to take some time to think about how we can prepare youth for future jobs, right? So just quickly, just put into place here, we all talked about, how we can focus on adaptability, digital literacy, creativity. We're going to add emotional intelligence here so that they are prepared for success. We also want to bear in mind how we can prepare youth for those emerging fields and industries, right? Because 5 years ago, we definitely didn't see the jobs that we have available to us today, right? So definitely speak with your business partners or form those business partnerships so that you can learn more about different industries and how you can best help youth prepare. And that, of course, will help for the long-term success of your youth and your program, right? So that's what I just want to end with here, thinking about the future and how you can prepare your youth. We do have a quick feedback form that was dropped in the chat box. Thanks, Dave. Please take a minute or two to share some feedback. We were able to talk about, I think it was 12 different soft skills here. So thank you all for sharing your strategies on how you are helping youth to practice those different skills, and hopefully we can see them master those skills, whether they are still participating in our program and maybe, they've gone off into their own internships or working as a part-time or full-time professional, and you're able to keep track on their progress. But thank you all for sharing those awesome activities that you are implementing in your program. Again, take a minute or two to share some feedback on today's session. I have up on the screen, if you haven't already done so, take a look at our website, 21stcclcntac.org, where you'll have access to all those free resources you can download. You can rewatch some archived trainings and webinars that we have done in the past. You can send any questions to info@21stcclcntac.org. If you haven't already done so, sign up for our newsletter so that you can stay up to date on the latest trends and upcoming events. And most importantly, follow us on social media, right? That's going to be a part of a lot of our culture here, right? With what we're sharing. But follow us on X and LinkedIn, 21st CCLC NTAC. But thank you all for joining us today. And again, thank you for your participation. Before you head out, please share your feedback by clicking on that link that Dave shared in the chat for us all. And I want to thank you, Chaz. Thank you so much for facilitating this session today with me. Great examples. Hopefully everyone got a chance to walk away with something new or had something that they resonated with and would like to continue to do in their program.
Absolutely. And I would like to thank you for facilitating this session with me. Your work with career readiness has been invaluable when it comes to talking about these soft skills.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks, Brittany. Thank you, Debbie.